Verification and validation can be tricky to understand. They're easy to confuse, mostly because a validation is a type of verification. So I want to differentiate them here for you clearly. Validation is a scientific evidence that you use to back up the choices you made in your food safety plan. So that might be a study that you found in a journal, a peer-reviewed journal. That might be a study you did on site of your equipment. Say you were testing that oven we keep talking about to make sure that it can cook those chicken nuggets thoroughly and remove the salmonella or kill the salmonella. That would be validation. Verification is about checking and ensuring that your plan is working. So is it being implemented on a day-to-day basis the way you intended it to? And are those controls actually doing their job? So if I have a bunch of corrective actions or some big recalls over and over again, I know my plan isn't working, right? And so what I need to do is I need to reevaluate my plan. So my verification procedures allow me to identify if anything is going wrong. So maybe my paperwork isn't being filled out properly. Maybe I have a piece of equipment that's not functioning the way it's supposed to. Maybe I have a procedure that's written and it's confusing and it's being done wrong consistently, right? So verification is all about reviewing your system. So I'm going to be looking at calibrating my control instruments like my thermometers and pH meters, having my metal detector calibrated. It's going to be reviewing my records, auditing my system, testing my products. These are all the things that I can do to make sure to show that my system is working and to identify any evolving problems. Now, you're required to reanalyze your plan at least every 3 years, but usually it happens sooner than that. Anytime you have a big change, like a new product, or you're adding a new line, or you're doing some construction, any big changes to what hazards might affect your product, you're going to reevaluate your plan. So it usually happens way more than every 3 years. Our validation example for EG Food Company is from the FDA 2013 Food Code. They found that they have to cook an egg to 158 degrees Fahrenheit for less than a second to cook it adequately, to serve safely, right? To kill off salmonella and any other potential pathogens. They also found this study that says egg coagulates at 158 degrees Fahrenheit and higher temperatures if you add milk. So now what they've done, putting this information together, it says if they cook the egg and it looks firm, then they know they've cooked it enough to serve it safely. They also did a study to see how hot they normally get their eggs, and their actual minimum temperature is 162 degrees Fahrenheit. That essentially shows that they are always going beyond their critical limit. They set their critical limit at 158 based on the data that they gathered. For verification procedures, remember, this is what demonstrates your food safety plan is consistently being implemented the way you wrote it, the way you intended it to be. And we mentioned calibration of those monitoring instruments, testing. So that could also be environmental monitoring, which was mentioned earlier in the sanitation section. And then records review of all of those records around any of those preventive controls. If we look at EG Food Company's cook step and we look at their verification records, it's reviewing those logs again, reviewing corrective action records. You have 7 working days to review your records for the FDA regulated food products. If you're following USDA standards, then you have to do it before you ship out the product. So it can be challenging, but got to review all those records in 7 days. Then they have a daily accuracy check for the thermometer and an annual calibration of the thermometer. So like they put the thermometer in an ice bath to check every day, and then they might check it against an actual standard once a year. So what does it mean when I reanalyze my food safety plan? It's really reviewing it to see, do the choices I made still make sense? Are the hazards that I identified still the right hazards? Do I need to think of any new ones? Am I having any problems or issues? What's going well? And really just adjusting course as necessary. So for our next exercise, you get to discuss which verification activities you would do for the process control that you did in the other exercise, and discuss how you would validate that process control. So where am I going to get my information from? How am I going to organize it? All right. Moving on to record keeping. You're required to keep records around basically all the things we've been talking about for each preventive control. So that's monitoring, corrective action, verification, supply chain, and training records. Important things about records: permanent ink, nothing erasable. You want to write clearly so people can see. If you make a mistake, you do not scribble it out. You make a one solid line through it so it can still be seen. Write the correction, initial and date. Explain why you made the correction somewhere. So really, they want to see that you're actively filling these out in a way where you're not committing fraud, right? Fraud prevention is the big deal here. If you have electronic records, they need to be protected, so secure, password verified. You can't change them after they've been made. So if it's paper record, you X out you make a line through the white space. If it's an electronic record, then you would lock that specific record, right? And the only way you can make a change is if the person who made a mistake goes back, makes a change, but it's able to be seen, right? A single line through, they initial, they date, they say why the change was made. So very clear procedures around how we document any changes to prevent fraud. The person who is doing the monitoring is the one writing the record. It's very important. Unless for some reason, say their arm is broken, they can designate somebody else, but that again has to be documented. No sticky notes. Whatever you write on originally, that's your original record. You have to keep your original record. So if I write on my arm and my arm's my original record, that's a problem. All right, and then remember, we have to review those records every 7 working days. And then if somebody requests our records, an FDA agent comes and requests our records, or some other regulatory official, I have 24 hours to give it to them. Again, that's to prevent fraud. The other requirement is that we have to keep anything related to the food safety plan on site. So our food safety plan stays on site. Your electronic records are considered on site if you can access them on site. So things to think about when it comes to being organized around giving other people access to your records. So what's required in your food safety plan? Basically what we covered in the course of this class: hazard analysis, each type of preventive control, supply chain program, recall plan, monitoring, corrective action, and verification procedures. So your implementation records, that's the data around your monitoring, the corrective actions that were taken, the verification activities that you do, any validation documentation, your supply chain program docs, and your training docs. So we have a lot of implementation records. When we look at E.G. Food Company's cook step and we move to the records part, we look at what they've listed here, and it says cook log, cook temp by QA technician, corrective action records, verification records, and validation study. So basically what we saw in the last slide. So our next exercise, you're going to record the names of records that you would need for the process preventive control that you used previously. Discuss how you would organize and store records. So think about how you might store your data, whether it's in a cloud, whether it's in filing cabinets, or some mix thereof, and how you would easily be able to find things when you're asked for them. Because somebody who audits might pick random day or a random product and start diving in, and you need to be able to provide that. Recall plan. So a recall plan is required anytime you deem a hazard significant and you establish a preventive control. Now, you can have recalls for quality or for safety. We have 3 different classes of recalls. There's class 1, 2, and 3. Class 1, serious illness or death. Class 2, serious illness. Class 3, not significant harm, but you want to recall it anyway. And it probably will still incur some legal issues. It's really important to make sure that you plan those recall procedures ahead of time as fast as you can get it back. That's what you want to do. Best practice. Get everything back as quickly as possible. You're going to be doing effectiveness checks along the way. So how much product am I getting back? How quickly am I getting it back? And then doing mock recalls. So I'm going to test my system. If I alert these people, are they going to respond? Do they know what their job is? If I use this contact information, is it still correct? Is this the verbiage we want to use when we're addressing the public or our customers? Can I actually trace the products? That's the biggest one, right? You want to be able to see, if I try to find where all these things are located, can I 100% see where everything came from and where it went? And then the last part is about the disposition of the product. So that will be determined by the FDA. And that's whether or not you can get it back and rework it, or if it needs to be destroyed by you, or if your customers can dispose of that product. Most of the time, you're getting it back, you're destroying it yourself if you can't fix it. Our next exercise is pretty simple. All you have to do is read through that recall plan and compare it to your own if you have one. See what you like, see what you don't like. Decide whether or not you think you might use some of the systems that they have set up in there. So the regulation, preventive controls for human foods, is 21 CFR Part 117. So that has everything that we covered in this course. It's divided into subparts. And it's the first one is subpart A that says general provisions. That's about basically telling the FDA that you are manufacturing products, you're selling to the public, attesting that you actually did all these things, or you did a hazard analysis and you have controls in place. Subpart B is current good manufacturing practices. Subpart C is your hazard analysis and risk-based preventive controls. D is modified requirements. E, withdrawal of qualified facility exemption. So a qualified facility is a facility that makes less than $1 million annually on average over the past 3 years. That means they don't necessarily have to follow all of the provisions that the larger companies do. And different products will have different requirements. For example, craft beverages like beer, they only have to follow subparts A, B, and F. Speaking of F is record keeping procedures, and G is a supply chain program. So now that you know the general sections, the last thing you're going to do is watch this video that we have for you, and we have a crossword puzzle. All right. Thank you so much for watching. I want to take a moment and thank you for taking this course. I really appreciate your support in this. I just started my own business and I'm really excited to be doing this. So I just wanted to say a big thank you for being here and for this opportunity. Please contact me if you need anything. My email is m.marie.mac@gmail.com.